Hello students. So we're going to have a look at something now which is slightly ridiculously out of date for you. However, it's all good practice, I guess. So we're going to have a look at page 48, reading number 2. Instruction manual for a hand phone. Now many of you have no idea what a hand phone is, including me. We never referred to them in England as a hand phone. For obvious reasons. They don't fit in your hand in as much as they're not built into you. Maybe one day in the future they'll just put a chip into your hand for communication. Although it's unlikely because the way we're going in the future, no one's going to be allowed to speak to each other or have anything to talk about. So it's probably not going to happen. Chips in your hand though, I can see that coming. In the worst possible way. So instruction manual for a hand phone, and this is a Singaporean thing, referring to it as a hand phone. It's a bit of an oxymoron. I mean, it's a bit ridiculous because I guess the idea was that a mobile phone fits in your hand, but so does a non-mobile phone. Otherwise it wouldn't be much use. Can't imagine somebody holding a phone to their face with their foot or a part of somebody else's body. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So it fits in your hand. Okay. And what we're referring to here is the old-fashioned mobile phone. Now in America they call them cell phones. In England we call them mobiles. I don't know what you call them here. I don't know. Mobiles, I guess? I don't know. Cell phones come from the idea that they're based on cell towers. So there used to be a network of cell towers, so a big radio mast, and your phone would communicate by radio signal to the cell tower. So they had cells all over the place, everywhere. There used to be different kinds of cells, so you had different frequencies. There was I can't remember the first one. They were replaced by PCNs, personal communication networks. So the original one was, I can't remember. But they run on different frequencies. The original frequency was 800, or 900, sorry, and then they went down to 1800 millihertz. But they were getting dangerously close to the brain frequency that our brains operate on, which is why all this mobile phone radiation is so incredibly bad for people, and why people living in cities are, getting brain cancer. So yeah, electrical equipment and tools come with instruction manuals. They provide the user with step-by-step instructions on how the equipment works and how to access the different features to use the equipment most effectively. Interestingly, research shows that very few people read the manual before they begin to use the equipment. Can you think of a reason for that? Yeah, people are men. Read these sections from the instruction manual for a hand phone. So, now we're going to go back in time. Just shows you how fast things change. This is based on the idea of old-fashioned phones. I don't even have one lying about. I think all mine either broke or got given away. I break phones quite a lot because I'm a all-weather motorcyclist, so I get very wet, and sometimes I like to throw phones at things, so they break. Never done that with my my smartphone, which is here somewhere, not sure where. Never thrown it at anybody. Got it wet a few times. I personally love these old Nokia phones. The last one I had, I was at a staff party. I think it was a Khmer New Year party, and it fell out of my pocket and went straight into the icebox, straight in, underwater. Now when I used to sell mobile phones, water damage was never covered by any insurance. It was a write-off, it was a complete loss, so that was it, you've lost your phone. But this thing, fished it out, turned it off, dried it, and it switched back on, and it was absolutely fine. They were great little phones. The only thing that ever killed one was a cattle prod. As I say, I'm a scientist, I like to experiment. So let's have a look at, I'm not sure what the order of this is, because it doesn't really have an order. So Contact 75 hand phone instruction manual. Thank you for purchasing the Contact 75 hand phone, which is clearly a Nokia phone. Be sure to read this manual thoroughly before use and keep it handy until you feel confident using the hand phone. Number 1, we've got the contents, we have the accessories, then the getting started, then it goes through a logical order, charging the battery, because you can't even turn it on without charging the battery, In fact, what you normally get is when you buy any mobile phone, there's a flash charge. So there's a small flash charge that's gone through the battery just to keep the battery from collapsing. They flash it just to keep it going so that when it leaves the factory, there's enough to stop it collapsing. An absolute zero battery will just collapse in on itself, so they give it a flash charge. Switching the phone on and off, yeah, you've got to be able to do that before you can do absolutely anything else. So switching the phone on and off is a key thing. Shows you where the on-off button would be. I mean, it's pretty basic stuff. These days, you know that the send key is usually hold it down and turn it off and on. Well, they don't even have keys anymore. Locking the keypad and, of course, unlocking the keypad. Then we go to making a call using the phone book, which is making a call using the phone book is the first time you use the menu features of the phone. So it's teaching you to use it one step at a time and then answering a call. And these are the basic functions of the phone. Now these days, we almost never bother with this because, as it says, research shows, we don't bother with this at all. Most smartphones simply have a menu. You go through the menu and you learn how the phone is used. And before you know it, you understand how everything works. And you never have to read the manual. They're all pretty much the same, they're all pretty basic, and before you know it, all the features are loaded in your head. They've learned how to take this out of the equation. They've learned how to take the functions of the phone away and train you on them. So just using normal everyday technology, using Microsoft, using all the other stuff, has actually taught you how to use a phone. So most people these days can pick up a phone, and within a few hours or so, you're pretty much competent with it. Then we move on to the display. Now things were different then because at the top we had icons. So liquid crystal displays were quite primitive, and you'd have a shadow display where a crystal would produce like a shadow in front of you and show you the basic functions. And this continued to the present day on cheap motorcycles and scooters. We see LCD displays and they're fixed. You know, the speedo is a fixed gauge that scrolls up and down. It's only now that motorcycles are going over to dot matrix like we have on our mobile phones, our smartphones, full LCD. Dot matrix used to be sort of better. I had a BMW with a dot matrix screen, so it had no icons. Everything was a dot, and it was produced in a sort of wave. And it was almost like a modern TV. And they've gone further now. We've got full sort of mobile phone technology, TFT screens. The problem was cost and waterproofing, and those things have been dealt with years and years ago now. So we're switching over to that. Now these mobile phone screens are so cheap to produce that it's actually cheaper to put them on a motorcycle and a car than it is to make these old LCD screens. It's just cheaper to make the more modern one. That's a worry, isn't it, when you think about the technology of that it's actually cheaper to use modern technology than outdated technology. That's how cheap these things are to build. So we have navigation menus and lists. So it's like finding your way through the information report itself. You know, the menu will be laid out in a set function. Things have changed with mobile phones now. There isn't really a menu per se. You've got different apps that do different things. Even the instructions of the phone are built in there as an app. Then we have the main menu options. Then we go into the phone book, which is obviously a key feature. And we continue on down the power key, the scroll key. Then it goes into the accessories. Following items are supplied with your phone. We've got the rechargeable battery and the charger. And then we have the warning: use only batteries, chargers and accessories approved by the phone manufacturer for use with this phone model. Use of any other types may cause damage to the phone. There was a very good reason for putting those warnings on your phones. When I used to work in the mobile phone trade, we'd always put those warnings on the box. Please don't use any other battery except the ones we approve, because we don't make profit from those batteries. In fact, they're exactly the same. There was never any danger. I've never heard of an aftermarket battery giving any problems that a factory battery didn't cause. Generally speaking, the cheap second-hand batteries would last a little less. You'd get maybe 8 hours instead of 9, depending on the use, but they'd never be more dangerous. That was always just to keep profit going to the company that built the phone. So then we've got the getting started thing. I think we've scrolled down from page 1 to 2. The basic functions. Then you've got a display. You've got a graphic that shows you the phone cover on the back. The display is obviously the screen, keypad. Now again, screens were very expensive back then, so the screens were smaller. The buttons were larger so that you could see them. They'd not even light up all the time. Mostly they would. They'd have different functions. Things weren't as simple because they were built to a cost. Now, years ago when this book was published, these cheap Nokias that you can now pick up for what, $10? They were hundreds of dollars. When these phones came out, these were thousands of dollars. And to get to operate one, you had to buy a contract and sign yourself into a credit arrangement because these phones were too expensive to simply just buy outright. So people would pay monthly for them, usually at a loss. They were such a scam that the mobile phone company would usually make a loss. So they'd sell you the phone for half what it was worth because they know they're going to make up all of the money with you making phone calls and more. It's like PlayStations. When I was working briefly for Sony, PlayStations usually go out again for something like a third of the price it costs to build the machine. Although that changes as the production goes on, but the first round of machines are sold at a loss. And the reason is because they make all of their money on games. You can't sell games if you're not selling consoles. So the consoles are sold proportionately much cheaper than they're actually cost to build. A lot of times this happens with motorcycle racing. The homologation rules are that you've got to sell so many bikes of the same kind if you're allowed to race it. So often a company like, big companies like Honda, BMW, they'll sell a bike at a loss. They'll lose money on it so that they sell enough copies that they're allowed to race it. An example of that was the NC1, a racing bike. Ducati were destroying them on the racetrack, and Honda just couldn't allow that to happen. So they sold these amazing racing bikes for a lot less than they built them for. So instead of making a profit, they made a loss because a big business like that, they'll make a loss on the few motorbikes they sell, but because Honda are then winning all the competitions, everybody will buy a Honda and they'll make the profit back there. So sometimes you make a little loss here to make a big profit there. It's called a loss leader. So they've got the power key, they've got the scroll key, and it shows you where all the buttons are all the way around the phone. I'm not going to go into all the details because you can see it. Then we've got charging the battery. Connect the lead from the charger to the base of the phone. It tells you how to plug it in. Of course, these phones have been around for years. Most people are going to know exactly how to do that, but we have to treat you like you don't know. We have to treat people like they are ignorant, because some people would be, and those people are the ones reading the manual. Normally, these things would have asked you to charge the phone overnight to get the battery hot, mix the chemicals up. That was usually good for the battery. Then we'd ask you to discharge it all the way, so run the phone completely dead and then recharge, normally 3 times, and you wouldn't get full power out of your battery until it had totally charged, totally discharged. They started out with NiCads, nickel cadmium batteries, and those would last about a year. They could only take so many recharges, and you had to discharge them all the way to the bottom and then charge them all the way to the top. Otherwise, they'd get what you call memory. And which means if you half charge them or charge them for 10 minutes, they would only ever let you charge them for 10 minutes. So your battery would remember how it's being used and not let you use it any other way. Then they switched over to nickel metal hydride. They were better, they'd last a bit longer, and they were a lot lighter. But they still weren't perfect. And then we changed over to lithium ion, and we're still using lithium ion today. The problem with lithium ion is lithium itself is very, very destructive to the environment. We can't dispose of it. We have to mine it. It causes much more damage than mining for oil. So it's actually much worse for the environment to dig up lithium to make batteries for electric cars than it actually does to run cars on petrol. And that's without the idea that we also have to make the electricity to put in the car, and we're going to do that with fossil fuels. So it makes no sense to switch over to electric cars because we actually don't have the technology to run the batteries, at least not to make a profit out of it. So yeah, we've got the lithium ion batteries, so when you connect the phone, plug it in. And people are dumb. You cannot assume people are not dumb. When I was working in a mobile phone shop, we had this. We had a guy once come in with his phone, and he was working next door. We knew that his name was Keith. I knew him, I chatted with him, I bought my lunch from him. And he came in and said, "Oh, you sold me this phone, but it stopped working." And I said, "Yeah, we sold it to you yesterday." "Really? It stopped working already? That's really bad, because these are quite good phones." So I said to him, "Did you charge it up last night?" And he, "No." "Oh, what did you do?" He said, "I just spoke on it for 10 minutes and then it just cut out." I said, "Well, it's got a battery, you have to charge it." He said, "Oh, I have to charge it? It's like, yes. Did you think it was just going to work forever without being plugged in? It's like, yes. Okay. See, I'd assumed, because I was only young, I was only 19, I just assumed that he'd realised that, batteries needed charging. But you can never assume people are smart, and he wasn't, he was dumb as a rock. And you can never assume people understand, they don't know. Another guy, I may have told you this one before, these old Ericsson phones, they used to have a charger that plugged into the bottom of the phone and a charger that plugged into the wall, and the cable that attached the two came separately for different countries. So they plug it in, and that was how it worked. And he didn't realise that you had to put a cable in the middle. So he just plugged it in the wall, plugged it into his phone, and then wondered why it wasn't charging. He didn't read the instructions. It would scroll through the display to let you know it's charging. He never read that. He just didn't understand that you had to plug it in. And the guy was as thick as a plank. And he was there with his dog, and we said to him, who's the brains of the outfit? Is it the dog? Maybe you should ask the dog to plug your phone in. And he's like, well, why do I have to plug in a cable? And it's only now, in 2021, that we're starting to have induction chargers where you can put your phone on top of an induction mat and it will charge it through electric vibrations of the electromagnetic field vibrations. And that's only sort of happening now. And he thought that it would just transmit magic electricity. So little fairies would bring buckets of power over to his phone and just chuck it in. So I don't really thought that it's not how anything in the world worked, even now. So then we move on to the next page. Connecting the charger to the AC wall, the battery indicator will start scrolling. So that means that the little boxes will go beep, 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 and it'll let you know. So in one way or another, it'll flash. Same thing with those of you that have got older scooters. When you run out of petrol, the petrol light will flash. You might get a zero. You might get a little red engine warning light. These things are built onto your dashboard. On a motorcycle, we call them idiot lights. You've got your flashing green, and that's the same on every motorcycle everywhere around the world. You've got the flashing green indicator, you've got the orange petrol running light of power light, you've got the red warning lights. All those lights are universal, and we call them idiot lights so that you can't mess it up. So anyone can jump on one bike, go to another, and you see the danger lights, the blue for full headlight. All of these are standard and they're not unique. Every single bike has the same feature, so that you just know from looking at it that you're in trouble. I'm running out of petrol, I've left my indicators on, I'm using my full beams, and I'm driving into traffic. It's a warning for everybody. So then it tells you if not charging is displayed, wait for a while, and you get another warning, do not charge the battery when the phone cover is removed. I have actually seen this in manuals. This is taken from a real book. So that's the back of the phone, because what they used to be is a clamshell, and you take the back of the phone off and there'd be a battery that you could take out. They were only very small. I might have some, so they were very small. They were like this. You put them inside the phone. Don't charge with them off. The idea is that you could possibly get an electric shock off of it. People said, if you put your finger in it, you could get shocked. But they were 1.5 volts, so that wasn't really true. It turned out that they were worried that you might spill water in there and kill your phone. That's all it was. But the warnings are, again, they're idiot warnings. They don't do something stupid. Switching the phone on and off tells you how to do it. We've got one more warning. Do not switch on the phone in places where wireless phone use is prohibited or when it may cause interference or danger. This was talked about a lot in the 90s. They were talking about this a lot. Don't turn your phone on in hospitals because it will interfere with the electronics. My dad was in hospital once, and I said, he wanted to phone home. I said to the nurse, are we allowed to use a phone? Yeah. So it won't interfere with any of the machines? She said, oh no, that's rubbish. They just tell you that, it's nonsense. The reason that in hospitals that they don't like turning phones on is because it annoys the nurses. Aeroplanes as well, not allowed to have an aeroplane mobile phone on. But again, that was nonsense. If it was ever true, it certainly hasn't been true for the last 40 years. There's no danger to aeroplanes from a mobile phone. Again, it's just a nuisance. And once you've taken off, a mobile phone isn't going to work anyway because it works by cell towers, and those cell towers are too far away, and you're moving over them way too fast. So there's no signal. Interestingly, Boeing put a system on the plane where it transmitted a beam to cell towers as the plane moved over. So you could actually join a cell network on board the aeroplane, and the aeroplane would talk to the ground. And that was brought in just after the 2000 September the 11th terrorist attack. Although people in the terrorist attack were supposed to be talking to their family on mobile phones, even though that was impossible. So yeah, use the phone with the cover mounted. Locking the keypad. Keypad lock was always very important because otherwise you'd sit down on your phone, because these phones were a lot smaller than they are today and relatively cheaper. So we didn't, and they were tough. So we didn't care about them as much as we care about our smartphones. You know, you sit down on an iPhone, it's gonna snap. Sit down on one of these phones, you're gonna snap. So it wasn't such a big deal. So we'd stick them in our back pocket. At first, we used to get cases, like leather cases to protect them, and we just gave up on all that because they were just extra padding, and we just stick them in our back pockets and not worry about our phones. But then they'd make phone calls while you sat down. We call it a bum dial. So we started fitting key locks, so you press 2 buttons to release the lock so that you could make phone calls. Tells you how to use that. So that's it in a nutshell. So these are the instructions, and it's true, most people aren't going to read them because they're kind of boring. Why would you want to read a set of instructions when all these phones work very, very similarly? And I worked in mobile phones, and yeah, I actually sat down and read a couple of manuals, and then by the 3rd or 4th phone I'm thinking, well, they're all the same. There's not really any difference to it, and it's much more interesting to just get the phone out and have a look. That's what we all did, and that's what everybody does. The other side of that is I also worked, one of my first jobs when I left school, and I was very young, I was only a teenager, and I worked at a electrical shop dealing with customer complaints. So they'd bring back their things that didn't work. And it was just the same old nonsense every single time. Like, I can't get this TV to tune in. One of them, she brought back a Sony with this guy, and they said, we can't get this television working. It just won't work. There's something wrong with it. I can't tune it in. And back in the day, you had to tune everything manually. So I said, all right, I'll set it up in the bay. So I went out to the service bay, set it all up, had a look at the manual, how does it work? And all you had to do was press tune and hold it for 3 seconds, and the television went in and tuned itself. And I got it back and said, there you go, it's all tuned in for you. And I went, oh, you're so clever, how did you do it? I have this technique. What I do is I open the instruction manual and I read page 2. That was it, that's all you had to do. But people are they were too intellectually lazy to do it even then. Another one was, and I kind of sympathise with these people. They bought this CD player. Now this is a music player back in the day. They were quite big, they had a CD in them. And they couldn't get it to work. And I was less sympathetic with them because they were complete scumbags who just came in and screamed at us. And it's like, I didn't understand, why are you screaming at us? Because my job is not, I didn't make this thing, I didn't build this thing, my job is to help you. So if it's broken, I'll replace it for you or give you the money back. I have no fight here. But they were just screaming and screaming and screaming at me. We had to sit them down in the manager's office. There's me, I read the instruction manual, so right, you've got the button in the wrong place. And the button was weird, it was on, off, or play. And they just assumed turn it on and it would play, but it doesn't. You had to turn it to play. I don't know what the on switch did, but it didn't make any sense to me. I said, okay, look, you're doing it wrong. And then I did that click and it came on. And they didn't apologise. Oh, this is stupid. Why is it so stupid? I want my money back. It's like, well, you haven't read the instructions. You know, and it literally took 20 seconds to figure out what they were doing wrong. And the problem we had with them is that they were just horrible people that were screaming and screaming at us. And if they'd have just sort of sat down and said, look, can't get this working, can you have a look at it for us? And all we would have done is if I couldn't have fixed it in 2 minutes, I would have said, yeah, let's tell you what do you want? Do you want to change it for something else? Do you want your money back? Or do you want me to send it away for repair? What do you want me to do? And I would have done it for them, because that was my job. They'd only just bought it. It was 2 days old, so you know, it's no problem. And that's what most shops will be like. They'll say, you know, what can I do to help you? How can I make you happy? That's your job. So yeah, bit of a double-edged sword. Instruction manuals, most of them are poorly written. They're very boring because they're very matter of fact. They're written to you in the second person. They tell you, you must do this, you must do that, which is second person perspective. They're usually very, very basic because they have to explain right down to the idiot level, which makes them pretty useless to most people. So most people skip them, but because they skip them, they miss all the other things that the thing can do, and then they have problems. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Interesting though that today with modern smartphones, we don't get instruction manuals because they've learned people don't read them. And so what's the point? So instead, they've made the phone much simpler so that people can go through it, figure out all the features, and get it working for themselves. So that's that. Not much to learn from this. So we'll quickly go through the questions. Questions 1 through 12. I'll give you some time to do that, and then we'll come back and do the answers. Okay, so I've given you some time, you should have the answers now. So number one, what is the function of the table of contents? Well, the table of contents tells you in order what the different sections of the instructions are, because most people aren't going to need to look at accessories, they're not going to look at getting started, they're going to go straight to display or phone book, or the features of the phone that are different from the phone they just had. So they're looking for specific features, so the table of contents tells you where to look in the book to get those things. I use motorcycle manuals the same way. Sometimes I'll have to do some service work, and I'll have to go to the manual and say, well, where's the battery? Because I don't know where the battery's stored. This has happened to me with Hondas, especially Honda Clicks. Sometimes the battery's under the seat, sometimes it's under the floor, sometimes it's under the headlights. So a quick look at the instructions. Where is it? Ah, there it is. So you need to flick straight to that piece of information. How should the reader use the table of contents? Well, it doesn't really say how you should use it, but I would use it as a guide to where to go in the book to find things. It is a nice way of breaking down the whole book, so you could argue that it's an index. It's an index, just like the front of our textbooks. It's an index that guides you where to look through for information to tell you what's to come. What are the two possible consequences of using a charger not approved by the phone manufacturer? Well, it says here, the consequences are, it might cause damage to the phone, or that's all it is. Just says that. That can't be right. Damage the phone, or don't know. Or I think there was talk of these things exploding or damaging your phone or whatever. But really, it was all about just keeping profit in the hands of the manufacturer. In fact, BMW went even further. I've had three BMW motorcycles. My first one was a 1200, which is their flagship top of the range bike. And that thing, I fitted a non-standard brake light bulb, just a bulb, and it wouldn't let me. It kept warning me, the bulb is incorrect. Use a BMW approved bulb. And it was warning me right across the dash, you've used the wrong bulb. Spend more money. Seriously, that bad. Not usually that bad with phones, but technology was like that. They brought in a thing called the CAN bus. It was like a separate computer that processed all the inputs and outputs from the bike. And all it was for is to control your spending. So it made you spend money with BMW. It's pretty awful. What type of information is grouped under the heading Getting Started? Basic things like charging it, switching it on and off, things like that. They're very basic information. How is the function of the navigation key different from the function of other keys? Well, it's the main key. So if we go back to navigation, we've got, it's the big one in the middle. I actually remember using these, locking the pads. I don't know where that is, but it would be the main key that goes up and down the menus. So it's it's a multi-input key, so it can usually go up, down, left or right, and pressing it in also selects. So they have different functions on different phones, but the navigation key just takes you up and down through the menu. What could happen if you pull the charger out by the cord rather than the lead? Well, again, this is the kind of dumb information that you do have to put in for dumb people. You could just break the lead. It's as simple as that. If you plug it in and pull it by the cable, especially if it's not straight, you will re-break the cable. I think they did a very nice job of that on Apple laptops. The socket is magnetic and it just locks on, and it doesn't really go into the machine, so you can pull it off in any direction and it won't cause any damage. My laptop actually has this. The cable is kind of frayed where it's been pulled at different angles. So some laptops have an L-shaped plug, so it doesn't cause as much problems, but it will cause problems. What is meant by the word scrolling? Well, you've got a menu and you go up and down through it. So up and down in the menu is called scrolling because the highlighted option is in the middle and you can see the up and down ones. Usually two, one up, one down. It's sometimes five, so you can see two up, two down. But it'll tell you where you are in the menu and it looks like you're scrolling up and down it. That's all it means. So write down a sentence that is in the imperative voice. There's quite a few. I trust that you've got one somewhere. Anything that's telling you what to do, you must do this. It's imperative, therefore, that you do this. So let's have a very quick look. Be sure to read this manual thoroughly before use. Okay. Charging the battery supplied with the phone may take up to 5 hours. Write the modal expressing possibility in this sentence. May. Okay, it's very simple. What is the purpose of the first label diagram? The first label diagram is to show you where the buttons are on the phone. What is the purpose of the boxed paragraph warning? The actual purpose of the boxed paragraph labelled warning on the first page is to get you to buy your batteries from the company that made the phone and not spend money with other people. And what is the purpose of an instruction manual? The instruction manual purpose is to get you to use your equipment correctly, and don't go thinking that this is because the company that built your equipment cares about you. This is to save from warranty claims. This is to save you from doing something stupid that damages the product that then they have to repair or replace. Well, they don't want to do that. So they give you an instruction manual that tells you all the things you can and can't do. So if you break those rules, they don't have to pay you back. That's the actual function of an instruction manual. It's not to give you advice or constructive information so that you're better and your use of your product is better. It's to protect them from your stupidity. And that's what these things really do exist for. Having said that, protecting yourself from your stupidity should always be a key thing that you're interested in doing. Never underestimate our own stupidity. I have never underestimated mine. So that's pretty much it. Pretty basic stuff. I don't think there's anything much more to go into with this. These are pretty out of date, but it's always interesting to go back because not much has changed. In terms of what the instruction manual does to protect the company, nothing much has changed. The reasons for these existing, they still exist today. It's actually a bit of a worry that technology hasn't moved on much faster and further beyond this, that we're still worrying about how to protect the manufacturer. In fact, I would argue that we've gone in many ways backwards. To use an analogy of a motorcycle again, I'm afraid, my uncle has a 1972 motorcycle that was registered in 1973. So manufactured 72, first on the road in 1973. So that's the same as me. I was manufactured in 72 and I was released to the world in 73, 48 years ago. And in that time, not much has changed. He's got a 650cc Triumph that's capable of 100 miles an hour flat out, and I've got a BMW that's the 650cc's that is also capable of 100 miles an hour flat out. They use roughly the same amount of petrol. Mine is lighter and slightly more agile. His is heavier but looks nicer. But really, in 50 years, things should have really changed, and they really haven't. And that's a bit of a worry. All the manufacturers have learned to do is make their products cheaper for them in terms of manufacturing. They haven't made them significantly better. Now we're going to be changing soon to electrical motorcycles. We'll see how that works. My guess is that it'll be a massive step backwards. And in terms of mobile phones, we have seen some evolution, but it's been very, very rapid. We've gone from these kind of phones that literally had well, they had 3 memories on board. The rest were held in a SIM card. Then they'd go usually to 99. Now we've got pretty much infinite storage for videos and all sorts of other things. Is it a step forward in terms of communication? Socially, I would argue that it isn't. Technologically, it certainly is. I think ignoring mobile phones, I don't think anything has technologically moved forward significantly in the last 50 years. Digital technology, binary, has definitely changed the world in terms of computers, but we haven't seen that sort of development in anything except our mobile phones. I'm sure there's a very good reason for that, and I'm sure we're all not going to like it, and we're all going to be finding out in the next decade. All right, boys and girls, thank you very much. I'll see you next time.